Talk to us more about what you're hearing about what's happened in the past few hours.
Yes, so especially when it comes to this ceasefire that was this ultimatum from the Russians of this surrender in Mariupol that has been rejected by the Ukrainian side, saying that this is not something that they're going to do at the time. This is a clear position that the Ukrainians have taken, that they are going to fight for the city of Mariupol. There is about 350,000 people still trapped in this city that has been under bombardment since March 2nd. It's a big port city in the country, and it is a crucial place for the Ukrainians to remain. And right now there is a key concern over access to food and water and other crucial infrastructure within the city, but it doesn't look like the Ukrainians are willing to give it up to the Russians.
Yeah, and Aggie, can you talk more about that? Because earlier today you were actually at a place where they're shipping out food and supplies into Ukraine. What is the situation like with the relief efforts? Are they able to get it to Ukrainians despite sort of this fighting that we're still seeing going on the ground?
Yes, so from the depot that I was at today in Rzeszów that is used by the UNHCR and the World Food Programme, their key concern is getting it over the border. So they see themselves purely as a distribution hub from Poland to get those lorries into Ukraine. And they have two places that they send them to, in Lviv, near the Polish border, and Uzhhorod, near the Slovakian border. And from those places, then the real challenge occurs of how to distribute those supplies from those locations in the west of the country into the areas that are experiencing more fighting.
And Aggie, we mentioned that the 10 million displaced people now, a lot of those people are still within Ukraine, but a lot of them, as we're hearing from the site where you're at right now, are fleeing into Poland. What are you hearing from them? What are some of the experiences that they've shared with you?
So, Jen, I've now been here for a couple of weeks, and when I first arrived a couple of weeks ago, a lot of the people were getting out of the country as a precaution. They were leaving the country, often people who had connections already within the EU, and so they were using those connections to get out as quickly as possible. Now, a lot of the people who are leaving at this time have had experience of what is going on the ground. They're people who are coming from areas like, I've spoken to a woman recently from Sumy that was under attack recently, and also from Kharkiv, and the people who are fleeing now have a lot more direct experiences of the war itself and the trauma that could bring.
And they're mainly going into Poland, right, Aggie?
Yes. So the Polish have already taken in over 2 million people from Ukraine. That is a big border between Poland and Ukraine. And the reason why so many people are coming over is because of these existing routes that people are taking, like, for instance, to this very train station where I'm staying now in Przemysl. And so a lot of people have been coming in. And now the real question is whether or not you can have people continue to arrive, and then where they go next, like where can they go from here, whether they're able to stay around this area or find other places in the country. Like, for instance, in Warsaw and Krakow, they are already concerned with not having enough housing to house all the refugees who are coming in.
Yeah, and Aggie, I know last week you were speaking to a number of officials about this concern within Poland. U.S. President Joe Biden's going to be traveling to Poland. What is the message that we're going to hear from Polish President Duda about this refugee situation? What is the aid that they're asking for?
That's the thing. That's the key word, is aid. I think the Polish are interested in, if they're able to secure enough housing for people. Not only would they need more financial aid from other countries in order to support them in this relief effort, but potentially they'd want other countries to take in refugees themselves. And that will also be probably part of the concern for the Polish president when he speaks to Biden.
Yeah, and we'll also hear President Biden today speaking with other European leaders. Do you know specifically what the EU is going to say more broadly about this situation and what they need from the U.S.?
I think something that the EU is really interested in is not just like the European Union, but also NATO. And the concern for the European Union is how their Eastern European nations like Poland and like the Baltics will be supported by the US when it comes to security concerns. A lot of Poles are also concerned with the fact that Ukraine essentially is just over the border, and that conflict, especially when we hear of reports of airstrikes nearer to the Polish border, that is a key concern for the Polish as well. And so they're tying the concerns as the European Union with their concerns as NATO members and what that could mean, what support they're expecting in terms of defense from the US.
All right, Bloomberg's Aggie Cantrell, thank you so much for your time and for your reporting that you've been doing for the past few days. Now let's bring in retired Major General Arnold Panaro. He previously served as a Senate Armed Services Committee staff director and is currently the chairman of the board for the National Defense Industrial Association. General Panaro, thank you so much for being here. I believe we have you on the phone. And I want to just sort of pick up with what we were talking to Aggie about. Let's start with Mariupol, where Ukraine, as we mentioned, rejected a request by Russian forces to surrender. What do you think this says about the Russian strategy at this point in time?
Well, Jennifer, a privilege to be with you. And of course, it shows the incredible fierce fighting spirit of the Ukrainian people when Putin has just about reduced that entire city to rubble like he's trying to do to all of Ukraine. His whole goal is to reduce that entire country to rubble. He shut that city down. They have no electricity. They have no water. They have no food. And yet they refuse to surrender. And I think that you're going to see that fierce fighting spirit duplicated all over Ukraine. But I think we have to understand the West and the United States in the lead has got to step up our supplies, lethal supplies, non-lethal supplies. We've got to do more to help Ukraine, to help these incredibly determined and fierce fighters for freedom.
General, talk about those lethal supplies, those lethal weapons, because last week we know that Biden and Congress approved $800 million to be sent over to Ukraine, which included drones. But you want to see more lethal weapons. Specify that a little bit.
Well, for example, while we are sending them the javelins and the stingers, basic ammunition, food, medical supplies, for example, if we'd given them Harpoon missiles, the Ukrainians could have taken out some of the Russian fleet in the Black Sea that's basically launching cruise missiles into the southern part of Ukraine. We need to give them, obviously the West is doing a lot, but we need to do a lot more because as you can see, Putin is not deterred. He's killing women and children, slaughtering women and children. He's intentionally targeting areas where they're seeking shelter. These are war crimes happening before our very eyes each and every day. So there's a lot more in terms of weapons that we could give the Ukrainians that would put the Russians in much more of a hurt locker than they are in right now.
But General, the concern with that from a lot of experts and analysts is that just provokes Putin, that escalates us into World War III. Is that not a concern of yours?
Look, we're going to have to take more risk. I don't think the United States and the West can sit back and allow Putin to destroy an entire country and turn it to rubble. And guess what? The NATO countries are next. Anyone that thinks that if we just let him destroy Ukraine, that somehow he's going to stop there. Moldova and Finland get ready. The NATO countries get ready. And so we have to stop him now. And I just think we're going to have to take more risk. I don't think the West can stand by and watch him slaughter women and children at the cyclical rate as he's doing now.
When you say risks, does that mean NATO countries should enter into a war?
Well, if it takes that, it's going to take that because, frankly, he isn't going to stop in Ukraine. So the war is going to come to NATO, whether they like it or not.
General, I want to also talk about sort of the role that China plays in this because, President Biden spoke with Xi Jinping on Friday, and we also heard from a Chinese ambassador over the weekend specifically about what their relationship has been with Russia at this point in time. I want to play a little bit of sound and then talk to you out of it.
There's a disinformation about China providing military assistance to Russia. What China is doing is send foods, medicine, sleeping bags, and baby formula, not weapons and ammunition to any party. And we are against the war, as I said. We will do everything to de-escalate the crisis.
All right, General, that was the Chinese ambassador to the U.S. speaking with Margaret Brennan on Sunday. Many people believe that China could take more of an official stance on this current conflict, this current war. What do you say?
Well, I would say the Chinese ambassador speaks with forked tongue. We know that they're providing aid and supplies to Russia under the table, just like they do to North Korea, just like they did in the Korean War, just like they did in the Vietnam War. I was an infantry platoon commander in Vietnam. One of my missions was to interdict the Ho Chi Minh Trail. China claimed they were not in the war, but I actually fought up with Chinese soldiers on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So they speak with forked tongue. Yes, they should do a lot more until Russia stops. And also, we need to basically beef up our deterrence in Taiwan. We need to start now and not let Taiwan get in a situation Ukraine was in, playing catch-up. We need to put long-range missiles in Taiwan that can range Shanghai and threaten Shanghai and their financial and cultural centers. We need to basically beef that deterrence up. I do not take the Chinese ambassador at his word. He speaks with forked tongue.
Is there no room, though, for diplomacy? I mean, right now we're showing Biden and Xi, there was no major breakthrough on Friday, but they could potentially play a role here. So before resorting to weapons and to more casualty, why not stick to diplomacy? And then what can the U.S. do?
Well, they certainly could exercise diplomacy, but I mean, it's kind of hard to basically put pressure on Putin diplomatically while at the same time you're slipping him aid under the table. So they've got to cut off any support they're giving to Russia. Yes, I believe China could play a very important role if they were to tell Putin, stop, and we're not going to be buying your oil. We're not going to be supplying you with any foreign currency or anything of that nature. But that's not what they're doing right now. Our intelligence people truly believe that China is providing under the table assistance.